All right, sick. All right, let's jump into this. All right, y'all. This is the Dynasty Warzone DFS podcast. We are going to be breaking down the 4-game slate on DraftKings. Again, it's the 4 games, the whole 4 games, not the 2-game slate on Saturday or Sunday. This is all the games together. But again, feel free to use this information if you are interested in showdowns or those 2-game slates. And again, this is just going to be DraftKings when we're talking those pricings, just the pricings. It's going to be on DraftKings. I'm your host, at FF Tyler. Tyler. I'm joined by my co-host, Lou, at Lou Dog Sports. We're going to jump right into things. We're going to start at the quarterback position. We're going to go by position this time. Taking a look at this QB position, Lou, one of the first guys that sticks out to me is going to have to be Lamar Jackson. Yes, he's one of the higher-priced quarterbacks on the slate, but there's a couple reasons why I really like him this week, and obviously that has a lot to do with the matchup. I think the big piece for this for me is that the Bill looking at the Bills last week against the Colts, they didn't apply much pressure. Philip Rivers was pretty much in a clean pocket the entire game. And when I look at Lamar Jackson's stats, when he's in that clean pocket, we see his quarterback rating rise almost 30 points when he's in a clean pocket. In fact, he's thrown like 21 of his, 26 touchdowns this year in clean pockets. That's good for him. But the real reason I'm on Lamar Jackson, that's just a nice little ancillary piece. The real reason I'm on Lamar Jackson is the rushing. The Bills gave up the 12th most rushing yards to quarterbacks on the year, and they've given up 7 rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks on the year. That's 3rd most. They are not good at defending rushing quarterbacks, and it appears that they're not great at getting pressure. They're about middle of the pack in the NFL. So when I look at his price, I look at the upside that he does present, especially with his legs. Lamar Jackson is one of the first quarterbacks I've landed on.
Yeah, I think personally I might be a little lower on Jackson than you are. Obviously, he has the upside. We've seen him running a ton. He basically runs at least 10 times a game right now, and we know the Bills' defense just aren't that great against the run in general. So I like it. He is 7,600. It is a little on the expensive side, just compared to others on this slate. But I guess my problem with it is he's not going to throw the ball 30 times.
Yep.
He rarely does. And if he's not getting there for you on the ground, if he doesn't rush in a touchdown, then I think other guys are likely to at least stay pace, if not pass him. I think he's the type of guy who has generally a floor of like 22 to 25 fantasy points, but
Absolutely.
It seems like his ceiling isn't there as it was last season. So I don't really know if he has a ceiling of like 35 points in this spot unless he's getting you the 100-yard bonus. So that's my concern with Lamar is he going to even throw it over 200 yards in multiple touchdowns in this game? Like you said, this is a matchup that it's more likely that he does it. So I wouldn't be surprised. So I think if I was building for like MME, I would try to be even with the field on Lamar. I don't really have as that big of a stance on him.
Okay, so if Lamar is not your favorite quarterback, looking at this quarterback list, right now, you're sitting at your computer, it's 1:13 Eastern Standard Time, the most legit standard time. Here we are. Who's your favorite quarterback, man? Like, it's just one that sticks out to you the most, the one that you feel the most, I don't know if safe's the right word, but the guy that you're going to be have the highest ownership on, just got the best feelings.
I actually think I'm going to go with Mahomes. I do like Josh Allen as well, but there are some weather concerns in that game, which, I mean, as of us talking right now, I don't expect it to snow for that game, at least not as much as earlier in the week we were a little concerned on,
Yep.
but it should be cold, and if it does end up snowing, that could limit the pass game for both of those quarterbacks. So that's where I kind of lean on the Mahomes side, where we saw what happens with this Browns defense in games where there's a lot of passing and a talented quarterback on the other side. Big Ben went wild on them last week, setting records, actual records for across ever with the pass completions that he had last week.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I don't expect Mahomes to be necessarily trailing and needing to do that, but the likelihood that Mahomes just does whatever he wants on this defense is pretty high. And he's another guy where I think he has a 20-point floor, definitely in the spot, and they're home. They want to win because it's a playoff game. So I think he's got a pretty decent floor, and I think his ceiling is higher because he's more likely to throw for 4 or 5 touchdowns, 300-yard bonus than a Lamar or even Allen.
And especially considering the running back situation they're looking at right now. I mean, we'll definitely get more detail talking about the Chiefs running backs, but CEH not happening, and then it's just a bunch of guys. So, they're a passing team anyway.
I think I would expect CEH to
I haven't heard one way or another. But I think what I'm saying is it's still a very convoluted running back.
I mean, they don't really use their running backs, but
exactly.
I mean, we'll come to running backs, but pretty much all 3 of these quarterbacks they take over and don't really. Either they're not using the running backs or they act as running backs. And in that case, that's why these 3 really stand out for me versus the other QBs.
And you mean 3 isn't like, so Josh Allen is that third one. So we're looking at the 3 highest quarterbacks on the slate. Josh Allen, real quick. The one thing I do want to touch on, and go ahead, feel free to elaborate more, is we know that in whatever the game script is, the Bills are going to be throwing the football. We've seen when they are, regardless if they're winning, losing, neutral game scripts, they're going to be throwing the ball. It's just the way that they're playing football this year. And I think that now that we see Zach Moss out, it's going to trend even more. And one thing that I did notice last game that I was expecting to use that they were dialing up a bit more, rushes, like not scrambles, but actual QB rushes for Josh Allen with Zach Moss out of the game. So I expect some good rushing attempts, some of those high-value rushing attempts out of Josh Allen, along with the fact that they're going to be airing the hell out of this ball in this game. It's, 50-point over-under, pretty solid. There's 26 implied points here. Again, I think that we're agreeing that Josh Allen is one of the better plays, but would anything you'd like to add there about why you like Josh Allen this weekend?
I think in a cash game format, I lean Allen because of the price. He's $600 cheaper than Mahomes. He has that rushing upside. The prop on his rushing, I believe, is 6.5 carries and 35, 36, somewhere in that range was the yardage. So they expect him to run. And like I mentioned before, if this is a weather game, then he's probably going to be more likely to run. And it just seems like Moss was the guy that they wanted to use in the red zone.
Correct.
They almost never really use Singletary, even in past years. So I think Allen is in this spot, in this game, more likely to run for a touchdown. It's weird to say it for him, but I think this is the type of game where they would be, like you said, designing runs for him near the goal line. And with that, I think that has his upside and why I'm leaning him over Jackson right now.
I like the call. I haven't made my mind up yet, but it looks like we are enjoying the rushing attempts from the quarterbacks. I want to switch gears just a little bit with these quarterbacks and talk about a guy that, I want really nothing to do with, and that's going to be Jared Goff this week. Like, I do truly understand that, Goff's pricing is quite cheap, but at 5,200, it's not like that much cheaper. You don't get that much of savings. I'll tell you why I don't really like him. First things first. He's banged up. We know the thumb is not looking good. He's not going into this game 100%. I mean, you could probably say that about a lot of NFL players going into the playoffs. They're not 100%, but especially with Goff, and that thumb is very important for quarterbacks. And then you also look at Cooper Kupp, one of his best weapons. He's pretty banged up as well. It's got the lowest, over-under at 46 points, and the Rams hold the lowest implied total at about 20 points right there. And then I think I'm buying into the weather narrative here, Lou. So feel free to comment on this after I get done. But California boy, played in Berkeley, plays in LA. He's only played in 4 cold weather games, and I'll say cold weather games like around that 30-degree range in his career. And in all of those games, he's only thrown over 205 yards once. He doesn't perform well in the cold, and then you take a look at the injury, then you take a look at the total, and this just screams to me a situation where the Rams, who most of this year they have tried to be a team that takes a lot of time in their possession, like they want to eat the clock. And they have Akers, who we can talk about later, but again, they're willing to give him a lot of work. With all that stacked up, I think their approach in this game is going to be lean on their defense, which we know is elite, and just hand that ball off to Akers and ask very little of Jared Goff. Toss it to you.
Yeah, and we saw Goff had only 19 passes. Granted, he didn't start the game, but he played most of it. I think I agree with you on that side, where it doesn't seem like a great spot for Goff, and there's not really a need for them to lean on him. Kupp is like a game time decision. Without Kupp on the field, that hurts Goff as well. But this also could end up being a game where the Packers take a lead and Goff needs to end up throwing. And we have seen in the past that in game scripts like that, Goff has thrown 50 plus times and been forced to throw for like 400 passing yards. So I think it's in the range of outcomes, but they definitely don't want that to be their game plan. So I'd agree with you with that.
All right. Another quarterback that you're interested in, or one that you're completely fading if we haven't talked about him yet. We know it's a 4-game slate, so we're whittling down here on the list of quarterbacks, but another guy top of the mind, good or bad?
I like Baker. 5,300. I'd rather play him than Goff. He's not necessarily a high upside guy, but if we're looking for savings on a slate like this, he's nearly 3,000 less than Mahomes. And this is a strategy I've talked about before with you, where a way to be a little different we expect this game to be heavily owned, 57 over under. A way to be different in a way to access the Mahomes upside would be to play Baker instead. And with that 2,700, you're able to potentially get, 2 of the high end pass catchers for Mahomes and maybe add another one of the high dollar guys from another game. So Baker gives you some savings. And while he's not a guy who gets to 30 fantasy points very often, I think 18 plus will probably be enough from Baker to help you if you get the other pieces in your lineup right. So I think this is a matchup where Baker is more likely to throw the ball on his higher end of pass attempts. And so in that case, I think Baker is a pretty interesting option. What do you think about him?
I like Baker Mayfield. I'm with you if I'm not paying up with we talked about our love for those top 3 guys, but again, it's easy to love the higher price guys because they're higher price for a reason. I do like Baker Mayfield again. You mentioned it, highest total, other side of the ball. Kansas City's strength is on defense is creating pressure, but they got their guard back. The Browns did, and the line is great. I mean, I would almost wager to say that the Browns' offensive line is elite. So I think that strength of the pass rush creating pressure is going to be muted in a sense for the Chiefs. And then you look at the Browns' season, and it's kind of a tale of 2 seasons when it comes to how they decided to run their offense. He was averaging about 26 attempts through the first 12 games, and then there was a big shift in the way that the Browns started playing football. And over the last 6 games, Baker Mayfield has had about 37 attempts per game. Like we've seen that 11 attempts per game jump on average. He like Baker's cooking, man. He really is. I mean, 13 over those 6 games, he has a 13-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I think a lot of that has to do with getting Chubb back and getting the ground game moving, and then that opened things up for the pass. I'm with you on Baker Mayfield. I think that the idea of getting another piece of this game without having to pay up for Mahomes, I'm with you, man. Baker is one of my favorite plays if I'm not looking at those top 3. I would actually say he is my favorite play if I'm not looking at those top 3 quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think a likely outcome for Baker in this game is 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, which is 16 fantasy points. And I don't think this is going to be a game where he only throws the ball 20 times and has 100 yards passing. So he's where I'm going if I'm not paying up.
I love it. Is there another quarterback that you'd like to touch on, good or bad, before we shift over?
Not really. I don't think I'm going to play Rodgers. The Brady Breeze thing, I think they're both fine for tournaments. But Rodgers, as weird as it sounds, like he's having this amazing year, but it's a highly efficient year. It's similar to like a Russell Wilson type, where I mean, if you look at his attempts, he's not really throwing the ball a ton. He's only had 40 passing attempts twice on the whole year, and they're saying he's most likely to be MVP. He had 48 touchdowns this year. So he's really only getting there if he's getting maybe even the 300-yard bonus, 3+ touchdowns. Without that, he's really just working off of efficiency. And if the Rams defense are as strong and worrisome as we should be expecting them in this game, then I think that limits Rodgers a lot.
Agreed. Let's shift over to the running backs there for me, Lou. I think the big piece for me, the thing that I think we need to have a conversation about is, I haven't heard one way or another right now if Murray is going to be out. Either way, it doesn't look very promising. He looks pretty hurt. He didn't practice on Thursday. He's questionable. This isn't about Murray. This is obviously a bit more about Alvin Kamara. Kamara, if Murray's out, we can project an easy 20 to 22 touches for Kamara, but we know the defense he's going about, the run defense. The Bucs run defense is number 1 DVOA and 4th in yards allowed per carry. It is an elite run defense, but we also know that Kamara is an elite player. Your thoughts on Alvin Kamara as far as like getting the top stud running back, at least in my opinion, into your lineup at 7,900?
I think he's one of the better plays. 7,900 is a decent price for him as well. I think he was 8,500 last week. Yeah. So his price actually came down. If he was over 8K, I don't think I would like it as much. But I don't even think Murray in or out matters all that much. He only had 4 carries last week in that game where he didn't get hurt until the fourth quarter. So I'm not necessarily worried about if Murray's active or not in this case. It might be the type of thing where if he is inactive, that adds 2 or 3 extra touches from Kamara as a floor. The way that they're using Kamara has changed, and he's not getting these spike target games anymore. Instead, he's getting only a few catches and more carries. Instead, I don't remember a time when Alvin Kamara was getting 20+ rush attempts in games, but the last 2 he's had 22 and 23. Yep. And with that, he's last week he was 1 yard off of the 100-yard bonus. But with that and his efficiency running the ball, I think that improves the likelihood that he hits the 100-yard bonus, and he's going to get a few catches at least. So I think he's the safest play at the running back position. It is a tougher matchup, so to expect him to get 5 yards a carry against this Buccaneers defense isn't very high, but he's such a focal point of this offense, and we know what he does in the red zone for them. He's basically the guy, even when Murray's there. Murray randomly will get these touchdowns, or Taysom Hill, but I think Kamara is going to be one of the higher owned players on the slate, but I think for good reason.
And then another running back at the top, got to talk about Aaron Jones real quick. I alluded to it before about how the Rams try to take control of football. Actually, the Rams and the Packers are 2 of the top teams in terms of average time of possession. And that also speaks to the efficiency numbers from Aaron Rodgers. But with Aaron Jones, there's a situation here when I think that the Packers take the same approach as the Rams, where they just try to run the ball and take over the clock. We can get to later about the Jalen Ramsey, Devonta Adams matchup, but part of me thinks they might not be looking to Devonta Adams as much. Again, we can debate that later. And then you also got to look at Aaron Jones's usage as of late. They've been using him a lot especially in closer game situations. Week 14, 70% snap rate, 15, 90%. He did drop to about 40% against the Titans, but that was an absolute blowout. And then again, 70% snap rate against the Bears. Like, they have been leaning on Aaron Jones as of late. I think this is also a game where they could be leaning on Aaron Jones as the Rams. Although they are an elite defense, they are a bit more susceptible, on the ground than they are through the air. Again, Aaron Donald is a bit injured. Again, I don't know what the extent of the injury looks like, but it is something to think about, as he is an elite defensive tackle against the run, and he's just an elite defensive tackle. I'm not even going to go around on what he's good at. He's just good at everything. But Aaron Jones, he's sitting there for you at 6,800. We know he is that kind of running back that only takes one carry for him to pay off. Is he somebody that you're looking at?
Yeah, I really like Jones. I think he's close enough in price to Kamara that I think it's a good idea to, if you're getting off of Kamara, you just end up being on Jones for $1,000 cheaper, and then you upgrade somewhere else. I agree with the take that you said, where in these games that seem to quote unquote matter more, Jones becomes more active. And one thing that we've noticed a lot with Jones is when Devontae Adams is hurt, they tend to lean more on Jones in the pass game and goal line, where it's basically those two in the red zone. One of them scores the touchdown.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact stat off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in that 70% range, I'd say, where these are the two options that they have. And Rodgers isn't necessarily going for MVP anymore. They're more so I think they're gonna be more towards not exactly stat padding, but they want to win games. So it's gonna be most likely for them to win at the 5-yard line. Is it force a ball to Devontae Adams when Jalen Ramsey is on him, or hand the ball off or dump it off to Aaron Jones? So that's where I think this is a spot where I like Jones. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how active in the game Jamal Williams will be. He always seems to have his drives.
Williams, for sure. He's good.
But I think we're more likely to see 15 plus carries from Aaron Jones than the 10, 11 that he's had the last couple games, and probably like 3-4 catches. I think that's his floor. And like you said, he is the type of player who breaks off these big 40, 50-yard touchdowns. So that helps his upside. And in this matchup against the Rams that have been playing a bunch of zone recently, I think it's a good spot for Jones.
Yep. And then I want to shift over to the Browns running backs. This is going to be a hotly debated topic, and I expect both of these running backs to have decent ownership, especially Chubb's way. You look at Chubb since returning from his injury. He's had about 19 touches a game for over 100 yards and a touchdown. That's what he averages per game. 18 touches, over 100 yards, and a touchdown every single game. He's absolutely been cooking. And we know that the Chiefs are susceptible to running backs, especially running backs on the ground. But let me correct myself, especially running backs in the pass game, which also leads me to Kareem Hunt. And I can't leave this conversation about talking about the revenge narrative of playing his old team. How are you handling these two running backs in your lineups? They're good matchups. They're both phenomenal football players. Chubb's up at 6,600, and the Kareem Hunt's all the way down at 4,800. So you have quite a savings if you do go down to Hunt. It's tough to project the usage. We know that Chubb's going to get more snaps, more carries, probably more touches, but Hunt's been getting a lot of work around that goal line as of late. Your thoughts on these two Browns running backs?
I like what I saw last week with Chubb. They were using him more in the passing game, and in a matchup against the Chiefs, I think the likelihood of using him in the passing game is or seeing that he was used in the passing game last week shows that they're willing to do that this week, which makes me think he's still likely to be on the field a lot, versus in the past we thought, Kareem Hunt is the passing down back. Chubb is just the between the tackles and goal line kind of guy. But now he's just becoming more active overall. And a lot of these targets that Nick Chubb gets are very easy catches, which let him do work after the catch. And he's been doing pretty well with that. So I think they have a lot of trust in Chubb in the passing game. And I think I'm expecting more people to go to Aaron Jones, and people have the thought, now Kareem Hunt is finally cheap. He had been sort of priced up a lot recently, but Now he's cheap. He's 4,800. This is a matchup where game script is going to lead to Kareem Hunt games, but we haven't really noticed that with Kareem Hunt recently. Like the beginning of the year, he was getting a bunch of targets, but he hasn't been getting as many targets recently, and you can't really expect him to get more than like 7 or 8 carries, and unless he's getting chunk yards on those carries. He really is a boomer bust touchdown guy right now.
Okay.
And I mean, for 4,800, I think that's a reasonable price for a guy who you're hoping for a touchdown. But I don't think his floor is necessarily the best. His floor is probably only like 4 or 5 points, just because of the sheer volume that they're giving to Chubb instead. So I'd lean Chubb. I do like him in the spot, and his work in the pass game last week definitely excites me a little more about him.
And then shifting to Cam Akers, who is good. He's a great rookie. I talked about my hate for Goff in this game, in this matchup, considering the circumstances. I talked about how they want to try to get control of the game, run the possession. That would lead me directly to Cam Akers. And then you look at him, he's taking complete control of the backfield, man. He's had, over the last 5 games, he averages 25 touches. His snap rate's well over 70%. He's a bell cow. I mean, I look at the projections for these running backs in terms of just straight touches. Cam Akers rises to the top in terms of just getting those opportunities. I expect the Rams to try and move the ball through Cam Akers majority of this game. Well, whether or not that happens, we'll see. But I do think that given the opportunity, Akers is the guy to get a lot of touches. And then you look at him at 5,700. You got to love that price. I think the only thing that I might not love about Cam Akers is this isn't hidden information. People know it. And I expect a lot of people to be on Cam Akers this weekend. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd expect him to be one of the higher owned running backs. It probably depends on construction, on where people land with him, but he's definitely in a good spot. The downside is they don't have a high team total. They are just road underdogs, and if Goff does struggle in this game, then it might lead to Akers struggling as well, and they might not just be able to move the ball at all. So he does have downside risk, which some of these other running backs that are favored and might be in similar or better timeshares. Akers is a cheaper version of it. So that's where he's sort of this shiny new toy for people. But if you do think that the Packers just run away with this game, how active is Akers going to be in that game plan? Is this going to be more like, as odd as it is to sound, the Jets game when they were trailing and he only had 15 carries and 1 reception for 7 points? So I think it definitely limits some of his upside, just game flow concerns. But I think he's one of the safer plays on a
wildly cheap 4,500. We've seen 4 games this season where Zach Moss hasn't played, been injured, or left early. He has a 75% snap rate in all 4 of those games. In fact, he hit 85% or higher in 3 of those 4 games. It's easy to project, 18 to 22 opportunities. Thinking, 14, 15, 16 on the ground, maybe 5 to 7 targets. Yes, I definitely think that we run the risk of him not necessarily running a touchdown in, as I think Josh Allen is going to get more of those red zone looks. But at the same time, for 4,500, he's going to get a decent amount of opportunity. He is 4,500, but again, similar to Akers, I do think Devin Singletary will be the highest owned running back on the slate. I stand by that, especially considering how much work he should get in the price and the Zach Moss news. How are you handling Devin Singletary in your lineups?
I think he's the difference between getting off of him and Akers is there's just more options around Singletary, so it's easier to get off of him in the bigger fields, I'd say. Because with Akers, you go up to Dobbins, who's just highly touchdown dependent, and then it's the CEH and Ronald Jones range of guys who are injured or potentially injured. So with Singletary, I think it's easier to get off of him if needed. But he's basically locked into a cash build for me or any sort of small field tournaments. But his upside isn't as high as some of these other guys because of what we've talked about with Josh Allen, who without Zach Moss, Allen might be the quote unquote red zone running back.
Yep.
So Singletary might need to score a touchdown or two to really be in that game-winning lineup in a big field because of his ownership. He's safe and should get you about 10 to 12 fantasy points, but I don't really see him getting 20 plus very often, whereas someone like Kareem Hunt could easily get two touchdowns and like 4 or 5 catches in the spot and end up outscoring Singletary. So that's where I think on tournaments, I'm fine with getting off of Singletary just because of that ownership.
Yep.
And all you really need is the other guy you pick to outscore him. But I think for cash, you take the safety and just lock him in.
Is there another running back on this list, Lou, that you necessarily have a strong feeling about, as a strong yes or a strong no? The opinions, good or bad, top of your mind on that question?
Yeah, I kind of want to bounce this back to you, where if CH is out, do you prefer Darwin Thompson or Darrell Williams? And then if Rojo is out, how excited about Fournette would you be?
All right, so I'll start off by saying that I'm not interested in the Chiefs running backs this week. I think I wouldn't be surprised if like some of the high scoring lineups get the Chiefs running back right this week. But at the same time, like I just don't want to play that guessing game with, who's it going to be? I don't think any of the running backs out, even CH to an extent, but any of the running backs outside of CH really stand out from one another. I don't want to play that guessing game, especially in any type of, cash builds at all. I'm just fading the Chiefs backfield for the sense that like I don't have a good sense of what they're going to do. And I do think that if we do see 4 or 5 touchdowns, majority of those might come through the air. That's just the way the Chiefs like to score points. It's really just not worth the guessing game for me. So the Chiefs backfield is a bit of a fade for me. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. My only strong opinion is that I'm not interested.
Yeah. And something I figure I'd say with Akers, he's in the first game.
Yep.
So you aren't going to know about Edwards-Helaire or Ronald Jones when Akers plays. So if you're looking to play one of them, you're probably not playing Akers, but that allows you flexibility. So if you're going to be switching off and then, CEH isn't going to play, or you hear, he's going to play, but be on a snap count, or it's something like that, then you want to be able to have options with the rest of your lineup. So if both of those guys don't play, you probably go down like Fournette, and then all of a sudden you might have $600 extra. So you want to not limit yourself by playing too many in these early games. But that's also where I think Akers, it's harder to get off of him, because with Singletary, you have an extra game of wiggle room where you could see what happens in the first game and decide if you're going to need someone because, Akers went off, I didn't play him, let me get off of Singletary and go to like Kareem Hunt. So that's what I'd say regarding those. I kind of like CEH if he plays, just because it's one of the cheaper exposures to the Chiefs scoring.
Lots of touches too, man. I say it every week with CEH. It's like if he's active, I mean, I guess we've seen him active not playing, but if he's playing, he is getting the most touches on one of the best offenses in the NFL. So I definitely understand the thought there. I think like CEH wouldn't be a cash play for me at all if he's active, but I think, we're talking the tournament setup, like CEH is obviously in play.
Yeah. And I think you can play him with Mahomes with the idea that maybe he gets a couple of receptions, but any touchdowns that aren't through the air go to CEH. So that's where I think you can kind of pair them together. But I don't know if I would necessarily play him without, because I just don't see a scenario in that game where Mahomes, if they score multiple touchdowns, he's not throwing for at least 2, So I don't really see CEH getting multiple touchdowns in this game unless one is through the air. So that's where I kind of like pairing him with Mahomes.
Then just to go back to your Fournette thing, if Rojo doesn't play, I think I do have interest in Fournette. I think if you're not looking to get some of those cheaper running backs, like if you don't go with Hunt or Singletary, I think Fournette's obviously in play. He actually looked pretty good last week. Again, just more of the eye test thing. But I think he was looking like he was running in some mud there in the middle of the season, but I think that had to do with injury. There were some times when he was like running the football and I was watching the game and I thought it was Ronald Jones with some of the burst he was having and out of that backfield. So I think he's a bit more healthy. I think without Ronald Jones, I am interested in Fournette. But at the same time, like Rojo is a game time decision, and Fournette's playing in that final game. So I think like if you build yourself some room to make some moves on Sunday, like you could find out. But I just think him being in that last game and me not really knowing what's going to happen with Ronald Jones in terms of him being active or inactive, he's more of like a pause and wait and see kind of guy, and he's not a guy I'm excited about. But I think if the opportunity arises, and it's Sunday, he could find his way in my lineup. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm lukewarm on him, and I think that's how people should feel about Fournette in general.
Yeah, I agree. It not a great matchup, but we have seen when Rojo's not in there, he's the guy for whatever reason. He's just the guy, and for 4,900, if you can get 18 touches out of a running back, like it's usually like sign me up. But with it being a later game, it's hard to get there. So that's the type of thing where if you have him in and then Rojo starts, like do you switch off of him? So maybe you put him in like the flex where you could switch to a wide receiver in that same range or something like that.
Yep, absolutely. And before we shift to wide receivers for the sake of time here, do you have another running back you want to touch on, either strong yes or strong no?
No, I'm pretty set on running backs.
We hit them all. All right, let's shift over to the wide receiver position where things get a bit more juicy. I think we got to talk about Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers connection. We know how great it is, but it is Jalen Ramsey who is playing at a absolute elite level this year. I think we've had this conversation, Lou, where some individuals do get too caught up in the quote unquote shadow, right? When Jalen Ramsey's been actually on a guy, things have been he's locking them down. But I would not be surprised if they move Davante Adams around the formation, get him in the slot. He has a lot of production coming out of the slot this year, and I don't expect Ramsey to follow him in the slot. So I'm not necessarily thinking that like the shadow is necessarily a piece where I am afraid of getting Davante Adams in my lineups, but he is 8,600. He is 1,300 more than the next receiver, Diggs, and we have alluded to this being the smallest implied total. We talked about how we like Aaron Jones because they're going to try to control the clock. So I think there are red flags with Davante Adams, regardless of Jalen Ramsey. Is he in your lineup? Your thoughts on DA?
Yeah, this is more of a pricing play for me. He's 8,600, which isn't necessarily that much for him, but it's not even just Ramsey. It's sort of a tough matchup in general. And I think if I'm going to be on Aaron Jones, then I'm already thinking that Davante Adams' production is going to shift over anyway.
Agreed.
But it's Davante Adams, and we've seen it before. Like he could get 15 plus targets in this game where Rodgers is like, he's my guy, like maybe only 6 or 7 land, but he's the guy that Rodgers focuses on. So with Adams, his thing compared to some of these other guys is touchdown equity. Mm-hmm. And I think if you go down the list, the next highest touchdown equity guy is probably Mike Evans, where getting multiple touchdowns. Stephon Diggs is a guy who's going to get there on yards and catches, So I think the idea of playing Adams is you hope that he gets a few touchdowns. Maybe it only takes 3 or 4 plays where he's not covered by Ramsey for him to get like 50, 60 yards and a touchdown randomly. Mm-hmm. So I think with the zone that Rams have been playing, obviously, they want Jalen on him as often as possible. So this will be a great matchup to watch. And luckily, it's the first game of the day. So if you don't play Adams and he gets a 40 spot, then that you're going to have to catch up elsewhere with your lineup. So it will help you in that regard if you don't play him. But if you do play him, you're locking in $8,600 in salary for the next 3 games if he does for him, dud, which would be 12 points. So I don't really see do you see a scenario where he doesn't get 5 receptions at least?
No,
it's hard to
the
see
ball.
that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I think you made it quite obvious that there's a chance that Devontae Adams has 5 catches for 70, 80 yards, but I mean that 13 points at that 8,600 price. I mean that's a dud. You know what I'm saying? Like that really hurts you in your lineup, even if his floor is 12 points. So, generally, I am leaning to Aaron Jones over Devontae Adams. I will not be playing them both. So Devontae Adams is not a guy that I'm putting into my lineups. I could be eating my words here in about 3 or 4 hours, but that is the stance I'm taking. And I want to shift gears here just a little bit. Not looking down the wide receiver list, I'm going to talk about John Brown because I think there could be some squeaky wheel narrative here with John Brown as he goose-egged people last week, really burned a lot of people. But again, looking at the peripherals, he ran the most routes out of any of the wide receivers on the team. He had a 97% snap rate. Like things were looking good. He was being used in the field all over the place, running routes. He's on the field, but things just didn't work out for him in terms of, catching those balls, getting those points. So is there a scenario when you like getting John Brown in there? I don't expect the ownership to be that high. The price is pretty good at 4,600, and knowing that he's a full-time wide receiver when he's healthy and he's running a lot of routes, does he interest you?
I like Brown. It's tough for me because the thing with Brown is I still don't know how healthy he is.
Fair.
Obviously, he played a ton of snaps last week, so he's healthy enough to be out there on the field. And we saw Beasley was the one who was limping off the field at times. So I do believe that they regard John Brown a lot higher than Gabriel Davis. Davis, since Brown has been back, is playing way less snaps than he was when Brown is gone. So I think Brown takes that role back over. He's the high upside guy, and 4,600 is a great price to hit that upside. When you're comparing this to Singletary, where Singletary has a higher floor than John Brown, but John Brown has the 20+ point ceiling, where he's also likely getting 50 and plus points way more often than Singletary is. So if you're looking at just strictly price point, that's where I really like Brown. And like you said, a lot of people might be scared off from what he did last week. So he's my favorite to pair with Allen in those lineups.
Yeah, because everyone's going to go Diggs Allen again, man. That's going to be hot.
That's a great combo, though.
It is a great combo. I mean, it hasn't done people wrong. I mean, it's cash. Shifting again, another wide receiver that I really like a lot, Jarvis Landry. And he's a guy that I think I don't want to say building my cash lineups around, but he's a guy that I'm finding in my cash lineups pretty early as I start to build that. I alluded to it before. Again, the Browns are throwing the ball a hell of a lot more, and with OBJ out, it's not a surprise that he is the focal point of those increased pass attempts. In those 6 games that I highlighted last time, he has had just about 9 targets per game. He leads Cleveland in targets, catches, first down conversion yards. He is their wide receiver 1. We know Jarvis Landry is a good wide receiver. He has a large history of it. I expect him to catch a lot of balls. This is on DraftKings. It's full PPR. That's a good thing. Just taking a look at him and looking at his price, is that 5,600, I believe. Yep. It fits into my lineup well, and the floor should be there considering the game script and it being the highest implied point total on the day. Your thoughts on Jarvis Landry?
I really like Landry, and I think with him being just 200 more than Antonio Brown, people are going to be clicking on Antonio Brown's name, especially with what he's been doing the last few weeks, the Evans injury, whatnot. But like you said, Jarvis is the number 1 on this team. And what I do like about how they've been using Landry this season in particular is they are using him in the red zone more often since Odell's been out. And what did you say, the last 6 weeks? So in the last 6 weeks, he scored 4 touchdowns, and it's something that it wasn't really a thing for Jarvis Landry in the past, especially not when he was on the Dolphins. He was more of a high target volume type guy. So one concern that I have with him is he only had the 100-yard bonus once this year. So you're really hoping it's on volume. But like I mentioned in the Baker section, we expect the volume to be there today. And he runs the type of routes that I know in the past we harp on with this Kansas City defense shutting down those outside wide receivers. Landry is used way more around the field and more, I don't want to say like uniquely, but more of that gadget type where he might come out of this game with a carry or a passing attempt. He's got that upside where he could throw a touchdown in this game and none of us would be surprised. And it's a type of game. It's a playoff game where you're a team that's not going in expected to not win. The idea that Jarvis Landry has some sort of gadget floor today, I think, is a little higher. And I guess the game's tomorrow, but I really like Jarvis, and like you said, he's a pretty safe option in that range.
And then another guy I've been going to, similar to my cash lineups, it's been like going Landry, and then I go Michael Thomas, man. It's been an up and down year for Michael Thomas. There's a lot of different things going on, but the price at 6,700, it feels right. He's in a situation, the Buccaneers naturally are a bit of a pass funnel just because they're so good against the run and they're a little bit more susceptible against the pass. That lends itself well to Michael Thomas. We know that the Saints are likely going to be attacking the short area of the field. Again, that lends itself to Michael Thomas. He just seems like another guy that 9 to 10 targets, 10 targets is looking really good. You look at his last couple of games, things have been better. He hasn't exactly been smashing his value, but at the same time, he is still an elite wide receiver in this league. Yeah. The game itself, the second highest applied totals, it's 6,700 price is really what gets me onto Michael Thomas, considering he is going to be the focal point of the pass game. Thoughts on Michael Thomas, Slant Boy?
I think the price for Slant Boy is accurate. I don't necessarily think he's underpriced for what his role has been this year and the injury concerns, but we know he has the upside. I just don't know if the upside is the same as in years past because he's not getting 12 plus targets in pretty much every game that he was getting last year. So in that regard, I think 6,700 is a good price for him, but I think Diggs is basically what Michael Thomas was last year. So in this game, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, obviously, it's a strategy we've used all last year. You could play Michael Thomas and Kamara and just move on from this game. But I think it might be smarter today to choose one or the other. It's because of ownership. With this price for Michael Thomas, I expect him to be pretty owned. And I think the likelihood is he gets another game like last week, 5-6 for 70, 80 yards. And if he gets a touchdown, which we know Breeze does like to lean on him in the red zone, it's similar to the Packers where it's Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams when they're in the red zone. Here it's Kamara and Michael Thomas. So you're banking on these guys getting touchdowns, but at the same time, they're a higher likelihood of getting touchdowns. So I like Thomas for that price. I might be a little lower on him than you are, but that comes with the idea where I don't think he has the upside of going 10 catches, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns like he was doing last year.
Got you. And then I want to talk about Tyreek Hill, man. 8K, he's sitting there, right under Devontae Adams. You talked about liking Mahomes. He's a slate breaker, man. And, he's one of those guys that like you put your mouse over him and you like want to get him in your lineup, but at the same time, like he does cost a lot. So like, how are you handling Tyreek Hill this week?
I think Tyreek Hill is my favorite wide receiver of the week.
All right.
He's just I've been burned by him more so in season long leagues where I remember I had the league last year where I was up by 35 points, Monday night game. All they had left was Tyreek Hill, and I lost by 8. And I was just like, how did this happen? He had 2 touchdowns on the first whatever play. He had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. It's like this guy just has this breakaway ability in facing the Browns. What we saw last week, the Browns couldn't handle the short routes that Pittsburgh Steelers are running, and they're allowing all these yards after the catch. And I think Tyreek Hill is one of the best players in the league after the catch. If he gets these little short screen passes, then he just breaks off 60-yard touchdowns here and there. And with Sammy Watkins out, I think that only improves the target share for Tyreek in this game. And if they're going to try, you can't really cover Hill and Kelsey. So like one of them's either going to go off or they both go off. So it's hard if I'm making Mahomes lineups to choose between Tyreek and Kelsey. But I like Tyreek. He's 600 less than Devontae Adams is how I'm thinking of it. Okay. And I think he has a higher floor of targets let me rephrase that. I think he has a higher floor of successful targets, where I think there'll be more forced targets to Adams because of that matchup with Ramsey. And I just see this being a spot where Tyreek gets 100+ yards and a touchdown or two. And it's hard for me to be paying $1,300 less for Michael Thomas when I can try to find another $1,300 to get up to Tyreek.
All right, give me another wide receiver, Lou. Strong opinion, one way or another.
If we're going, I think someone who's not going to be as owned, who I kind of like in this spot, is Marquise Brown. He's been the alpha on this team, and Snead. There was those few weeks where Willie Snead looked like he was the alpha. Remember this?
Yeah, I do.
All of a sudden he's nothing, and now it's Marquise Brown. It's back to the Marquise Brown and Andrew's show. But what I have liked about Marquise, and I've been watching more Ravens games recently, and obviously I watched the game last week, but he's one of those first free options for Lamar, and where you were saying the clean pocket idea. But I've noticed Lamar does look to him in the red zone more often than I would have thought, and maybe that's just this year, but he did have 8 touchdowns on the season, which he's 5,200, and we know he has the ability to get those long touchdowns, but I've noticed that Lamar is willing to throw the short area passes to him as well and let him just run with it. So I like what I've seen with Marquise Brown the last few weeks, and I think 5,200 is too cheap for him. And they're facing the Bills, who, they're an okay defense, but I don't think it's the type of thing like Tre'Davious White might be on him, but as we've mentioned before, like I'm not too scared about cornerback matchups when it comes to these guys who they're going to lean on them either way. So I like Marquise Brown.
All right, Lou, before we go to tight ends, one more wide receiver, high fade, or someone you are absolutely interested in?
I would say in the Chiefs, without Watkins, I like DeMarcus Robinson. I think people will go to Mecole Hardman, and for a great reason. But I like DeMarcus Robinson, and then also like Allen Lazard, who might get some extra targets if Devontae is getting covered and harder to throw to. So I think Lazard's upside is there for 3,900. He's probably my favorite cheap wide receiver.
All right, tight end position. We mentioned it before. I think to me it's like Mahomes, Kelsey. Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek. If you're not going to go with Tyreek, are you going to go with Kelsey? Like clearly, huge jump as he is the highest priced tight end on the slate by quite a bit. By 2,800. Is Kelsey a guy that you're going to?
Yeah, I like Kelsey. I think he's, and it's weird because I don't necessarily want to say that he's safer than Tyreek because I think they're both pretty similar. But if you look at Kelsey's game logs, it's pretty insane. Since week 8, he's only had less than 10 targets once. And in that game, he was 8 for 82, which the thing is, there's so many tight ends on the slate who probably aren't going to hit 16 fantasy points. So you're locking in the points from him, and it's the Browns, who we know are just not good against tight ends. But then if you drop 2,800, you're getting Mark Andrews, who's also in a great spot. So
absolutely,
it's so tough for me. But I think I'd be playing Kelsey more in the cash game sense, and then I'd lean Tyreek in in those GPPs.
Yeah, and let's talk about Andrews because he is a lot cheaper. He's the second highest tight end on the slate. It's probably the best matchup across the board for the Ravens. The Buffalo gave up 92 receptions to the tight end position on the year, which is a lot, folks. And we've already seen this matchup before, and it went very well. I see it as you talked about Brown. I think, I really like getting Andrews because there's the thing, Lamar Jackson is throwing for touchdowns. It's probably going to be going to Andrews or Marquise Brown at this point.
And so we were saying we want him to be throwing for touchdowns if we want to be playing him.
Exactly. So I think that, you play Lamar Jackson, it makes sense that you either stack it with Brown or stack it with Andrews. I don't think I'm bold enough to go with both of them with Lamar Jackson. But I think if you are playing Lamar Jackson, I would probably lean Andrews over I guess it's more of a correlation play than a stack with two players. But at the same time, I would lean Andrews over Hollywood Brown here. Thoughts on Andrews as the second highest priced tight end on the slate in a good spot?
Yeah. I like that take. I have basically the same take where if I'm playing Lamar, I'm playing Andrews as the tight end. I'm probably doing like Lamar, Andrews, Tyreek in that lineup. But if I'm playing a different quarterback, that's when I'm more likely to play Marquise, because I think where Andrews really gets his upside is we see it all the time where he gets just 2 touchdowns a game. And that's where the stack really is working out in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
But what is nice with Mark Andrews, the second half of the year, he's had at least 5 targets in every game since week 8. And he was the guy we used to have concerns with the targets, because he would get in those games where he was getting 2 touchdowns, it was like 3 catches, 30 yards, 2 touchdowns. But now he's a guy who's getting 5 catches. If we look at his game log, he's got 4 for 41, 4 for 27, 6 for 76, 5 for 76, 5 for 78, 5 for 96. So he's been getting that 5 for 50 a lot of the time more recently. Mm-hmm. So I think he's a lot safer than maybe in years past. He was more of this boom or bust option, but now he actually has a pretty decent floor, and he's only 5,000. We know that his ceiling, if he goes 5 for 70 and 2 touchdowns, that's probably at least matching Kelsey, and you're getting a discount on Kelsey's ownership by going to Andrews. So he's in this, he's a little sandwiched in his price where people might stay off of him. And that's where you might be able to really capture that upside.
And then if I'm not paying up for those 2 tight ends, I'm going directly to Austin Hooper at this point. 3,800 is pretty damn cheap considering how expensive Kelsey is. And then we know the Chiefs. We talked about the Chiefs game again, the high implied total. But the Chiefs are best attacked. We talked about the running backs, but they're also pretty susceptible to tight end play. And Austin Hooper, last couple of weeks, has had some eye-popping stats in terms of usage. We saw 11 targets in week 18. Again, dropped to 5 and 17, but 15 targets in week 16. Joku is doubtful at this point. So it seems it might be the pretty much only big running tight end on the field. So what makes me think is like there could be some good volume there at 3,800 in a game that there's going to be a lot of points. I think that it's not, I don't know if it's too wild to go with Baker, Landry, and Hooper. I don't know if I would necessarily go that far in cash games, but at the same time, I see that 3,800 price and knowing some of the volume he's been getting as of late, and I do like Austin Hooper.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say play that in cash games, but that what you just described sounds like a great tournament team to me. And we saw it with the Browns game last week, and we've seen it. What was that? The Bengals, where they could just have this back and forth game where both teams score over 30 real life points. And in that case, you're playing Baker, Landry, Hooper, and then Tyreek and Kelsey. There's so many things you could play because of how cheap those guys are. And I think Hooper is he's probably my favorite of the cheap ones, but I think a lot of people are going to be on it, especially with the high total of that game. But right next to him is Gronk, and I'm not going to go there. So I think Hooper is going to have higher ownership, but for 3,800, if he does catch a touchdown or get 4 or 5 catches in this game, then he might be more so needed at that low price than some of these other guys. And one thing I'm liking a lot this week is the double tight end builds, where you're playing Kelsey and Hooper in the same lineup, or Andrews and Hooper, or Andrews and Kelsey, things like that. And when you have Hooper at 3,800, you're comparing him to those wide receivers at 3,800. So it's kind of deciding, do you like Hooper or do you like Allen Lazard? And that's where I think his value really comes into play, is if you're doing this double tight end builds.
All right. Give me one more tight end, Lou, that you're interested in, or somebody that you're heavily fading.
I think I'm gonna go this route and say Tyler Higbee is the guy I'm interested in if Cooper Kupp misses. I don't know. We probably have we got another like hour before we get that news, I would think.
Yep.
And if we do find out that Cooper Kupp is out, then Tyler Higbee seems to be one of the better benefactors in those scenarios. I think without Cooper Kupp, you might see more like 5 or 6 targets for Tyler Higbee. And if it is one of those games that we mentioned earlier where Goff does have to pass the ball more often, then Higbee also has the upside in the red zone. So I like Higbee as sort of more of an off-the-wall play.
All right, let's shift over, finally close things out here with the defenses. You know how I ask it, one up, one down. If you're paying up, who are you paying for? If you're paying down, who are you paying for? Or maybe you just like one.
Yeah, defense, you kind of just do whatever.
Whatever fits.
But I generally am taking defense last, but I would say I like the Saints defense. It's if you can get up to the Packers with what you're saying on Goff and his potential of just being bad in this game from being being cold and his injury and whatnot, then Packers probably are good, but they're a little more expensive. I like the Saints. They're a pretty good defense. And then lower, I do like the Rams, partially because it's going to be a low-scoring game, we expect, based on Vegas totals. But they do apply a lot of pressure to the quarterback, and Rodgers isn't the type of guy who throws many interceptions or fumbles the ball often, but he could get sacked 4 or 5 times in this game. And in that sense, for 2,600, I mean, to get other things to fit, if you're already playing Cam Akers, those two correlate together. So I kind of like the Rams for cheap. Do you have any side on between them and the Ravens?
I'll go Rams. It's basically Rams and Packers. Those are my 2 options, just because of the game itself. I mean, like I think that, like, as we've been talking through this and thoughts that I've had prior to jumping in this conversation with you, is that 46-point total Rams and Packers. I think you can go under, man. Like I think there's a good chance that goes under. Again, they're going to try to just run the ball, try to slow the game down, keep the ball in their possession. I don't expect a lot of scoring in this game. So I think, looking at the Rams or Packers, those are usually the 2 places that I've been looking. I will say that my third favorite would probably be the Ravens, but just because I think, in a weird way, I think maybe the Ravens have the best chance at a pick 6. Like, I'm not projecting pick 6s here, but that's more of a gut check because
it's like the way Allen plays.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's Packers, Ravens, or Rams. I think those are the 3 that I'm considering.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You have Rodgers, Breeze, and Brady all on the slate, and serve just as an aside. But we didn't really mention we wanted to play any of those 3. But then we're also not saying that we really want to play defenses against them. So it's kind of tough. And
yeah, I get it.
The Buffalo Ravens game, if it's cold, if it ends up snowing, then that could be a good target for defenses. So this is really a week where it's like just play whatever defense, but I'm probably staying away from the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, definitely. Lou, your thoughts, final thoughts, on this divisional 4-game slate on DraftKings. I know you talked about last time, just to reiterate it, where it's like, pivoting is going to be huge because we have one game at a time, checking your lineup, check against who you're playing, how you're sitting, and making those changes game by game to make sure that you're still in the running, especially in those large tournament fields, is going to be key. Anything else to add of your thoughts on this 4-game slate?
Yeah, basically what you said, where Akers is going to be highly owned. Devontae Adams could be highly owned, and they're in that first game. So if you played Akers, he gets 6 to 8 points, then I think you want to be more likely to switch over and play a Baker Mayfield, or you play players in that Buccaneers Saints game. And that's sort of the flexibility you want to have. But if Akers does really well, then you can be safer with your other picks. So with each game, you just have to be able to be flexible if you want to change or if you feel the need to change based on how those games happen. If this first game ends up being 60 points combined and you only played one player from it, then you're going to have to somehow catch up points, So just being able to be flexible is going to be big on this slate.
All right, that's going to do it for our divisional round DFS show. Again, 4-game slate on DraftKings. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter at FFTylero. Follow Lou on Twitter at LouDogSports. I also own and operate a redraft site at the Fantasy Hot Read. Don't have a lot of content going on right now because it is redraft, but while you're following Lou and I, make sure you follow at Fantasy Hot Read as well. That is all we have today, folks. Good luck out there, and don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.